going to go ahead and comment this out. And another thing that we can do with arrays is sort them, but it may not work exactly like you think. So let's create var my array. And we'll store some values like 10, 44, 32, 100, 0, 44, 3, and 4. So we have a bunch of different values here in no particular order, and we'd like to sort them. Well, let's try it out. First, let's do a console.log so we can see what the order of the elements are. And then what we can do is call a method called sort on the array. And what sort will do is sort the elements inside of our array in place. Meaning anywhere we have this array stored, all of the elements are suddenly going to be sorted. So it's going to actually change the values inside of the array. It won't create a new array that is sorted, but will actually sort the array in place. So we can do my array.sort and just leave it at that. And let's see what happens when we do this. So we have our first console.log of it unsorted, and then we call sort, and then we can see what the my array is after we call sort. So I'm going to save it out and refresh, and we can see that the values have changed the order. We have our original order on the first line, but now they're in a new order. But they're not quite the order that we probably would have wanted. We were looking for a numerical sort, but we have a slightly different sort by default. The values go 0, 10, 100, 3, 32, 4, 44, and 44. Now this is sorted, but not numerically. It's actually sorted as though they were strings. So we can see that we start with a 0, then we start with our 1s, and then we start with our 3s and our 4s. So it's actually sorting them as though they were strings, and that's actually the default way that the array is going to sort items. It doesn't really recognize that all of our elements were numbers and should have been sorted numerically. However, we can change how the sort method works by providing a comparator function. Let's see how we do that. Basically, when we compare arrays, we're just comparing the different items to each other and seeing which ones are bigger or smaller, or which ones come first or last. The actual way in which we compare these is mostly abstracted away from us. Sort takes care of it. But if we want to change the way it actually sorts, we do need to write a little bit of code to help it along. And this is a function that will take two of the items from our array, and then it'll return whether or not the first one is bigger, smaller, or equal to the other one. With that information, JavaScript can then go through all the elements, use the comparator function to compare each of the items to each other, and return the sorted array. Now remember from Introduction to Programming that functions take in arguments and return values. So the function that sort will take as an argument is a function that takes two parameters, and we'll call them a and b. And here's the body of our function, and I'm going to just break it off into different lines here. So what we're doing here is we're passing an anonymous function, or that is a function without a name, to myArray.sort. We saw that earlier when we stored a function into an array. So our sort method is taking a function, and that function takes two parameters, a and b, which are two different elements from our array, and we need it to return a number. The sign of that number is what's going to determine whether a is larger than b, smaller than b, or equal to b. So if we return a negative number, that means a should come before b in our array. If we return a positive number, a should come after b in our array. And if we return 0, a and b are considered equal and can come in either order. So if we want to implement a numeric sort, we can think of it this way. If we want our smaller numbers to come first, then let's think about the case where a is 5 and b is 10. If we subtract b from a, meaning if we subtract 10 from 5, we get negative 5, which is negative, and would indicate that a comes before b, which is the case. If a was 10 and b was 5, and we subtracted b from a, then we get positive 5, meaning that a should come after b, which again is the case. So subtracting numbers offers a great way for us to get the correctly signed return value. Of course, if a and b are equal, a minus b is 0, meaning that they're the same, which is also what we want. We can only do this if we're sure that all of our elements are numbers, because that's the only thing we can subtract on. But since we see my array has all the correct values, we can write a very simple function saying return a minus b. So now JavaScript knows how to compare two elements in the array and should now compare them as though they were numbers. So let's go back and check it out. If we refresh, we can now see the elements in our array are sorted using a numerical sort, 0, 3, 4, 10, 32. Our two 44s are next to each other, and 100. So depending on what type of objects we have in here, we can write more complex comparator functions for our sorts. But I'm going to show you one other cool technique. Let's say we want to randomize the order of the elements in our function. Well, one technique we could use to do this is whenever we compare two elements, we could randomly return a number that's negative or positive with equal bias, and that should create a randomly sorted array. So let's just go ahead and comment out this return value, and let's return a random number that is going to be with equal probability, positive or negative. We'll remember from numbers that math.random returns a number from 0 to 1, but that's always going to be positive. So the way we can make that equally positive or negative is to subtract 0.5 from it. So now the value will be from negative 0.5 to 0.5, a random number. So if we return that, every time the comparator function is called with two elements, it'll randomly be greater than or less than, and actually not use A or B at all. So if we refresh and now we take a look, we get one sort, which is randomized, but every time we get it, we're going to get a different random sort. So that's another little clever way that you can shuffle an array based on math.random's random values. Finally, let's take a look at one more method that is called reverse. So we'll say var my array equals, we'll just make it simple, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll do a console.log of its value. And we can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then if we call myArray.reverse, and then we do another console.log, we can see that myArray.reverse has simply reversed the order of the elements inside of that array. So what was at the first index is now at the last, and so on and so forth. So now it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And this modifies the actual elements in the array, so anytime we take a look at myArray after we called reverse on it, the values will now be reversed in place. Up next, we'll take a look at a few more methods that are available on our arrays.